Yes, we are recording you.
Is it okay if...
Yeah, it's fine, it's fine.
Oh, it's too late.
So yeah, please tell me what you know this far about cooperative learning and why you want to learn about it and what you want to learn about it.
Cooperative learning is like working in groups.
That's the main idea, yes. But
Yeah.
it's
I don't know much about it, but we need to know because we are a group.
Yeah, like what we do in DNS is we study together. You know, like we're sitting in the same space, consuming the same content, but I'm still not sure if it can be labeled as cooperative learning or it fits the category because maybe just
Okay.
simultaneously studying. I don't know.
yes. So that's a very good point you bring up because that's one of the things I wanted to address. I suspect that this could happen, right? So cooperative learning is a specific technique to work in classrooms. It doesn't refer to you guys learning as a group in this situation, right? Although there's probably many things from cooperative learning that can be useful to you guys, right? But cooperative learning is a classroom technique, so to speak. So we can still do that if you're interested, but if some other aspects of learning interest you, we can just talk about how learning usually works, how social learning can work and stuff like that. I don't know if you want to learn about the specific classroom cooperative learning.
I think that since we are really dealing with classrooms like and students, it must be part of our discourse.
Okay, so
yeah.
You're doing your teaching practice this year, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I guess you have had your students work in groups this far, right?
Yeah. No.
No? I see some heads
Yeah.
turning.
We try.
You try. Okay, so
Sorry, it's also students that have maybe issues with collaborating or working in general. Like I have autistic students, and sometimes they really struggle to work with groups and deal with other people. So
okay,
it's
yeah,
really like the basic.
that can be more complicated, sure. But anyone else has tried this and like just working in groups, making your students work in groups?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And because it's a pretty usual practice, right? Just working in groups. But so I guess one of the main things we have to understand is that cooperative learning means working in groups, but not only just, okay, working groups, right? There's much more to it. There's specific ways of making that work better, right? It's the refined version of just break into groups and work together. Okay, so are there any like rules you have for yourself or with your students when you work in groups? Are there some important concepts that you keep in mind when breaking them into groups and making them work as a group, or do you just naturally say, okay, well, work in groups? And what do you think about when you think about working in groups?
How to divide?
Sorry,
How to divide?
I don't understand that. Sorry.
How to divide them? How to
How to divide them? Okay, yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Clear
And how do
instructions. Okay. Yeah.
How do you divide them?
My capacity,
Capacity.
mental capacity with my students.
It depends also on the purpose. If it's to sorry, I have to, because I'm a DNS teacher, so then I'm okay. If they're discussing something about something maybe more personal, like preparing for teaching practice,
Mm-hmm.
then I would pair up those that are not already very close together. So then they can also get a bigger variety of opinion. Thoughts from
Okay.
each other.
Any other philosophies about this?
Yeah, I divide the one that do big chaos from the one that needs calm, like they need more quiet space to work with. Like there are a group, like we usually take 2 classes because like there is a group that needs to have music and move around, and there is the other group that it needs to be silent and have their own space. So definitely needs to be in two different spaces, not even the same class.
But that's interesting to divide them based on need. Or for example, there are two groups and you divide the two troublemakers in a way. Or you
Yeah.
put them in one group so one group can work properly, or you sacrifice the other group. So I think it's always very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a desperate strategy that sometimes can be used, right, to group up the troublemakers. But that I understand why you would do that, right? I would probably be tempted to do that as well if they are really persistent. But in the end, that's probably not ideal. But I understand why you would do that, right? It's sometimes you just need to be able to focus a little bit and do your thing. Okay, so you're all to a certain point mentioning diversity, right, within a group. And that's one of the key points in cooperative learning. So cooperative learning is a series of concepts, rules, and techniques to make working as groups better. And usually it works by making groups of 4 people. Okay, so 4 students is the usual amount. You could go up to 6 and down to 3, I think, but ideally 4. If you can just make groups of 4, that's the ideal number. Now, so to make those groups of 4, you of course want to take into account the needs of different students, right, and try to make pairings that work. But you want to make what is called heterogeneous. I don't know how to say that in English specifically, but I guess you know what I mean, right? Heterogeneous groups, so groups that are different within the group, so students are different. But you don't want to make them too different. That's a mistake sometimes, you know. So if you think about how well students are doing in math, for instance, and you're giving math classes, pairing the best with the worst is not a good idea, right? You should have differences, but you shouldn't have the polar opposites in the same group, right? So maybe the mid-range with the higher range is fine, and the mid-range with the low range, but not the low and the high together, because that would be too big of a difference, and that can cause more problems than it can solve. So groups have to be diverse, but not too diverse, okay? Because you can go overboard with that. And it's good to take into account, you know, mixing up boys and girls, mixing up people from different ethnicities if you have people from different ethnicities, right? Not letting them group up in one group, and that's it. Yeah, just I think you get this, right? This is not a difficult concept to get for you guys. So trying to make different groups, but not too different, because that can be problematic. So, okay, what would you say, what are difficulties that you find or challenges that you find when asking your students to work in groups?
They want to group up by themselves with the one that they like the most.
They want
Okay.
they want the teacher to give the answers and not work and do the effort themselves.
Like they basically actually don't know how to cooperate.
They don't
Like
know
how
Yeah,
to use
they are
each
super
other
dumb.
in working together.
They run away.
Wow.
They one person takes the lead and everybody else just copies what the other person does.
Yeah, like, or it can be that it's not maybe just one leader, but there's like a disbalance in the way they interact or engage. Like there's one maybe talking a lot and the other is more quiet. Not having enough space to express.
Okay. Okay. So there's a few things I can I can say about this. Okay, so let's maybe go with there's like 3 basic principles. That's like the cooperative learning triad, they call it, or the triangle, with the 3 main concepts to keep in mind when doing cooperative learning that help with most of what you're saying right now. So it's normal, right, that students just say, well, I don't want to do a lot of work. So if one person is able to do it in the group, we just all sit back and wait for him to do it, right? That's a natural behavior considering the context. And I see that you're experienced with that kind of behavior. So cooperative learning says that there's 3 things we can do, right? So the first pillar is a positive interdependence. That basically means that to complete a specific task, every student in the group is needed to complete the task, right? So that could be done by assigning a specific part of the task to every one of the students, right? So they all need to do their part so that you can achieve the final goal. Now, of course, there's sometimes, since you have different students with different levels in each group, you can also try to adapt each of the subtasks, right, to the ability of every one of the students. But it's very, very, very important whenever you're trying to do cooperative learning to first teach students how to help each other, right? Because you have noticed that that doesn't really happen, right? Students don't really help each other, and that's probably because they don't know how to do that. And most of the time, what they do if they're asked to help is just they say they give the answer to the other students, and that's it. Right? That's probably what you have seen, and you must know that's not helping. Giving the answer is like the worst thing you can do. So, a first very important step as you try to improve how they work together is to teach everyone basically how to help other people, right? So giving the answer is a big no-no, right? You have to help them get to the answer without telling them. So that could be a good starting point, right? And then you can supervise how they do it, try to suggest other things. And one great thing about making them work in groups is that you don't have to be the classic teacher, right? You don't have to keep explaining things to the class and doing that. You can just walk through the group, see how they're doing, and assist in specific processes, right? If you see a student trying to help another student, you can just stop by and see how he's doing and try to give him some guidance. So teaching them how to help other students, I think, is fundamental because they are going to do that a lot, right? And one important part of cooperative learning is whenever a student doesn't really know how to progress in his task, he should be able to ask his group first and foremost, right? Not just giving up and, oh, that's it, I'm done, right? I'll wait for my group to do things, because he has to do something too, because his groups need him to do that thing. So he has to be able to ask for help, and his group has to be able to give him the help he needs, because the group only succeeds if everyone in the group succeeds, right? So you'll see the 3 main ideas are very connected. They kind of gravitate around this idea. So the second big idea is equal participation. So you're trying, again, right? It's all to try to make all students work the same and learn as much as they can. So equal participation is just making sure the tasks are pretty much equal in effort, at least. And you can also use, you can give roles, right? You can give extra tasks, coordination tasks to specific members of each group. Right? You can have a coordinator in each group that tries to make sure everyone is pitching in, everyone is giving his opinion, like a moderator, for instance. I don't know if you have tried that, but kids usually like, right, when you give them a special task like that, they get excited about it. Well, I hope they do. And yeah, you could give them a moderation task, for instance, so that they try to make sure everyone in their group is doing their part, basically. And then you have individual responsibility. That's the third pillar. And that basically means, so yeah, everyone had to pitch in, right? Everyone had to do their part. And by the end of the cooperative learning session, everyone has to have something to show, right? It's not just, okay, the group made one thing, but only one person wrote it, right? But everyone was thinking about it. No, everyone has to elaborate their own result, so to speak, right? So I can't think of a specific example, but one technique for this would be, if they have a task to do, you could break the task in 4 consecutive parts, and each part has to be done and written by one of the students. That way you can see what each and every one of them has done. That's very important because they can't like run away theoretically, right? They have to do their part, or there will just be a hole there and what happened here. And it makes sure that they are doing the work and not someone else is kind of doing their part, right? They really are the ones that have to do the work. So of course they can find ways to run around this a little bit, but that's also where you come in, right? To try to teach them to stay on course and to do these things as well as they can. So any comments about these three pillars? Does this make sense? Do you have any doubts about this? Do you think this can help you in any way?
I think it can help, but at the same time, regarding our students, we have such a specific type of students, each of our schools, that, for example, in this about mediator, like what you were saying about having a mediator as a student, I think is brilliant, but I don't see it very, like, I'm having a very hard time to visualize it in my case with my class. So in a way, like how to then adapt it according to their situation, to their also capabilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. This has to be adapted, right?
Yeah. Because my class, like I have 2 people with ADHD at the same time. I have other people who has a little schizophrenia, and the other one who cannot be sitting down in a class. So
Okay. But you can still find specific roles for them. Like people with ADHD have some limitations and some trouble with certain things, but they also have some strengths that other people don't have, right? So think about what those people can do especially well, and maybe put that to the service of the group, right? So that could be an option for people that don't usually find a use, right? Because normal education doesn't really let them be useful, right? So there you could really find a role that's a bit specific to them, but I think that can be managed, right? It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's an interesting thing to think about and to try for sure.
I used to use the natural wild law in group dynamics, which is like there is always time somebody that can drive the forces of the group, the small group, and to push and to give like the leadership position to that person, which most likely if he's not considered taken in consideration will just start to do other stuff and make and give make confusion in the class instead of like I prefer that to use him to put the responsibility on him, knowing that he has a big power to motivate the other, even if he's a bully that the other people are afraid of not doing what he says, but at least he's doing it in a educational way.
Wow.
Educational bullying, that's a good concept. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, but like the idea is there, right? Trying to use the specific potential of diverse students to the best of their ability, and that's something you already know, and you do very well to keep that in mind. Like, that's going to do a lot of good. There's so many things we can talk about. I'm trying to think of what would be most interesting for you. Or maybe you have like more questions or more things you would like to know specifically. Like, okay, have you ever tried, for example, to ask your students how they think working as a group worked when they have worked as a group, right? Doing a little self-evaluation of how they worked as a group, what problems there were, and how they could be solved, for instance. I'm not hearing.
Okay. Like I was the dancing teacher, and we had a choreography. We had an event in Jusminda, and after that activity, we did a reflection about what were the things that they were struggling with, or what were the things they were enjoying with.
And did you get a chance to work again with that group and apply the things you thought about?
No, they changed.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, and what did you think about that approach? Like about that self-awareness session at the end? What did you think about that?
I think they were so much mature than I thought. No, yeah. Yeah, they were very mature how they were saying, like not all of them were actively speaking, but also based on their action from the dance, and then after they were just laughing if they were making mistakes, they were just accepting of that, they just perform in front of like, I don't know, 100 people. So it was nice.
Okay, so I guess it's easier than for you to imagine, right? That this can be a very useful thing, but not just once in a while or after a big event or something like that, right? But especially if you're going to try to use cooperative learning, so this more refined way to work as groups in a classroom, one very important thing to do, not only for yourself, you're going to learn a lot by doing that, but students are also going to learn how to work together by evaluating how they work together. Like, we don't think about that naturally for some reason, but that's a very important part of learning anything. You have to know how you're doing and how you can improve, right? And we very easily forget about that. So especially when you're starting to use cooperative learning, but I would keep doing it from time to time, you should evaluate how it worked, right? So you do your first sessions, and after each of the sessions, you ask, okay, how did you think each of your groups worked? What was more difficult? What wasn't working? And what do you think we can do with that? And the good thing about this is if they come up with solutions for their own groups, they are probably going to understand, first of all, why those are good solutions, or at least solutions worth trying, right? And it's probably going to work a lot better than if you just told them, okay, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, because it's their idea. And I'm sure you know, right? Especially with kids, but with anyone really, if you have the idea of what to do next, you're going to be a lot more motivated and you're going to understand it better, right? So that's always a good thing to do. So I would really, really, really use that to guide how working, like how to progress working as groups, right? And that you can also use that among yourselves. You work as a group, so you could probably do those sessions between yourselves, right? And think together about, okay, what's working, what's not working, what would we like to improve, and how would we like to improve that? And even if people with no experience in education do this, they are going to figure out things they can improve. Like, this works with anyone, right? And you might find out better solutions because you're in this field. So it's something I would recommend always. That's evaluation for growth is always a good thing to do.
And I was thinking that I realized how much I don't know if it's been always like this, but especially in this new generation, like cooperation, it's a huge problem. But it's I can see a real cooperation only when there is a competition. It's the only way you can make people cooperate, even with the one that they don't like it or like they don't really cooperate with. But in general, I don't remember myself if it was so difficult to cooperate with people. But now I see that or is competition or is nothing else can work. So how do you train cooperation?
Okay, I have a question first. Why do you think the kids you work with have this attitude?
Why?
Like any of you, I'm really interested to know why do you think that could be?
I think that the experience they get until now, they are very individualized, and the difference between my youth and their, that I was not forced, like I was naturally introduced to the cooperation by just spending time with other kids instead of now having personalized games, individual time, and all this thing, especially in Denmark, where we know they're not famous to be the most social people.
Okay. Any other theories or thoughts about this? I can barely hear you.
No, sorry, I just said that, yeah, we can say these things about Danish people, but I mean, still a social democracy and it was better than maybe Italy, but that's just something side note, sorry. Yeah.
I think for them it's more effort, like they need to come out of themselves and try more in order to work with others. So they need motivation for that. And the competition, I think, is just one of the motivation to do something extra for effort.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So competition is, I don't think it's a bad way to introduce cooperative learning, and there are competitive techniques, right, to motivate students, because of course we know that's a very strong source of motivation. But motivation can also be attained from either presenting them with things that can actually interest them a lot, which I know is difficult sometimes because I don't know how much freedom you have in how you teach students and what you teach them. But that can be done with what you teach them, and also by sort of allowing them to take a more active and leading role in learning, right? So if they are the ones asking the questions, for instance, that they have to find a solution to, they might also be more motivated, right? So that's something else you can think about, but I know it's not always easy to work that way because you're very limited as a teacher most of the time. But if you find a way or time or a situation where you can do this, right, where you can let them ask the questions they have to answer, that probably also motivates them more, right? If they are their own little scientist that has to ask the questions and then find the answers. But well, yeah, motivation is a whole other huge topic, right? There's so much to say in that. Like they also have to feel that what they are doing is useful for them. And I don't know how it's in Denmark and with the kids you work with, but here in Spain, at least, most of the things they teach you are not perceived as useful. So it's not easy to be motivated, right? I guess that's a generalized problem, but I can't assume. I haven't yet been to Denmark. I will in 2 months. But,
for example, actually, now that you mention it, in my school, like it was like maybe it was 3 months ago, something like that. We have a very, very strong issue between our teenagers, the most adults, teenagers in a way, with their phones and TikTok and all this social media. Therefore, as the teachers decided, well, we decided in a way on, okay, how to bring this in a different perspective, because we don't understand anything about this world. And this world meant everything to them. Therefore, we put them for a week as an investigation on how to bring this information that they love to us. So in a way, for this week, they were the teachers.
exactly. Yeah, that's a super good idea.
In
So,
a
yeah.
morning assembly, they were teaching us what was OnlyFans, what was TikTok for them, and everything, and how they use it. Yeah, one of them was like, oh, OnlyFans is this, you know. And we, of course, we cannot say anything. Like it was their initiative doing it. So for 1 week, only it was the old elder, no, yeah, it was the oldest class doing it because they were capable of doing and taking this responsibility. But it was very interesting, very triggering sometimes, but very, very interesting. They were actually very into it.
That can be refined, right? So you see very strong potentials, you also see some issues, but if you evaluate this process, right, if you try to see what works and what doesn't work, you can find better ways to do that every time. And I think using the intrinsic motivation that students have, especially when they are in a situation where they just need to do what they want to do,